Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our lecture this morning, our meeting this morning, our online meeting. I am here by myself today, so I will be conducting the lecture and also shifting the slides and trying to keep up with the comments at the same time. So if you could please, as you join us, as you join me here, good morning, Juan. Just let me know you can see me, you can hear me well. Um, that would be great. We are going to start today reading our opening message from the book Living Spring. And since the lecture is going to be about, oh, good, thank you so much. Since the lecture is going to be about the parable of the sower, then I chose one of the texts by Emmanuel that he gives his interpretation of the parable, in which we're also going to use in our study today. Good morning, Carlos. Welcome. So let's go. It's chapter 64 of Living Spring, Sowers. A sower went out to sow his seed. It's in the Gospel of Matthew 13:3. Every one of the Divine Master's lessons is profound and sublime down to the smallest detail. When he begins narrating the parable of the sower, he starts with a lesson of inestimable importance worth remembering. He does not say that the sower has had a contract with third parties, but that he himself went out to sow, transferring this image to the soil of the Spirit, in which so many imperatives of renewal invite workers of goodwill to the sanctifying farming of spiritual growth. We are led to realize that servants of the gospel are compelled to go out personally in order to benefit others' hearts. It is necessary to tear down the old prison of the point of view and devote ourselves to serving our neighbors. As we learn the science of extracting ourselves from the dark jail of the self, we start a journey through the great continent called everyone's interest. And in its infinite expanse, we find the land of the souls choked with thorns, filled with misery, covered with stones or poison and mire, thus offering us a divine opportunity to act for the good of all. It was according to this script that the divine sower staged his ministry of light, starting his heavenly mission of assistance amidst humble shepherds, then continuing it amongst the friends of Nazareth and the scholars of Jerusalem, amongst verbose Pharisees and simple fishermen, the righteous and the unrighteous, the rich and the poor, the sick in body and soul, the old and the young, women and children. As we have said, the sower from heaven left his grandeur and came to us to spread the light of revelation and to increase our vision and discernment. And even though he could have been replaced by thousands of messengers, if he had wanted to, he humbled himself so that we could be exalted, and he put himself in darkness so that our light might shine. Therefore, let us leave our inhibitions behind and learn with the Master to go out to sow. All right, so this is our opening reading for today. Good morning, Mary. Let's all begin by doing our initial prayer. So I invite you to join me at this time by saying, Dear Master, thank you so much for this new opportunity, for this new day, the chance of being here, whether now in this Sunday morning or at any other time when we might tune into this message. Thank you for this opportunity, the opportunity to attune to the messages of your gospel of love and hope, the opportunity to have your teachings and your loving presence in our lives. For all the blessings that we have, including the bless of today, we want to say thank you and ask you to be with us as we go through these teachings, as we reflect on your gospel, so that we can not only understand but comprehend and be moved to become better souls in this world to fulfill our part and our mission in this planet. Thank you so much again, and so be it. All right, dear friends. So let me add my presentation here. Okay, so today we are going to go over the parable of the sower, and very much like Emmanuel says here in the beginning of the chapter that we just read from Living Spring, um, he's going to say that every one of the divine master's lesson is profound and sublime down to the smallest detail. So Emmanuel himself has done an incredible job in helping us to understand, in kind of peeling some of the layers of meanings behind those parables. The parable of the sower is of um, great importance to us at the present moment. Why? Because we are in a moment of transition. And in this transition, it is very, very important that each one of us understand what is our role in the world and how we can impact everything that is happening, how we can impact lives, how we can impact situations by being sowers, by fulfilling our part in this big scheme that we call life. So we're going to try to today together to kind of understand the parable of the sower. We're going to start by going over the parable itself that says, listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And it happened as he sowed that some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. Some fell on stony ground where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no crop. But other seed fell on good ground and yielded a crop that sprang up, increased, and produced, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. So this is the parable, which is important for us to kind of remember because, again, it has so many details. So we're going to try to get to these details together. So what we're going to be doing is we will be looking at the context of the parables. Where do we find the parables? Not only in the gospel, but in the gospel according to Spiritism. Also, what are the elements, the meaning, and the application of the parable? So, first of all, the parable is found in the Gospels of Luke, Matthew, and Mark. In the Gospel of Matthew, we are going to find this parable together with many other parables that constitute what we call the parables of the kingdom. And so we're looking at the context. So the parables of the kingdom. So when we look at the parables of the kingdom, right? So this again is a group of parables that Jesus is teaching us about the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is telling us about what is the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven, as we know, is this place of peace and harmony within our own souls. And this is precisely what we're going to see when he defines the kingdom of heaven in so many different ways. He starts by saying in the parable of the wheat and the weeds The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Or the parable of the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. The parable of the leaven. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven which a woman took and hid in 3 sat of flour until it was all leavened. And then we have the parable of the treasure. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in the field or the pearl. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And then once again, the kingdom of heaven, which is the parable of the net. The kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. So this is where the parable of the sower is found in the Gospel of Matthew, together with all these other parables that talk about the kingdom of heaven. And if we ask ourselves, what is the common denominator amongst all these parables? It is the fact that, and I have highlighted in yellow, that no matter how we look at it, it's always within. So that's the common denominator. So the lesson here is the work, the kingdom of heaven is not a place outside that we are trying to build, but is our inner state. It is the kingdom that we're going to build within our own souls. With that, we go to the gospel according to Spiritism. So in the gospel according to Spiritism, Kardec chose to put this parable in the chapter Be Perfect. So prior to the parable of the soul, the items that we find are characteristics of perfection, moral persons, good spirits, and then the parable of the sower. So what is that? What is the context? What is the meaning of finding this parable right here in this chapter? So the chapter is talking to us about characteristics of perfection, right? What is to be a moral person? What is to be a good spiritist? And the parable of the sower is going to come to tell us, how do we become those? The application of the gospel that needs to be absorbed, that needs to be understood. We need to comprehend, we need to integrate, and we need to manifest. So the parable of the sower is going to touch all these items that I just said, that will make it possible for us to reach perfection and to be the moral person and the good spiritist. Very well. And it starts by saying that a sower went out to sow. So if you're going to look at the details of the parable, like Emmanuel suggested, we're going to start by looking at the first verb that we have here, which is the verb to go. So the sower went out. And Emmanuel is going to say in his text, right, that we just read in the beginning, that one thing to pay attention, one aspect to pay attention here is that the sower did not delegate to others to do. He could have done it, but he didn't pass it on to somebody else, to a third party. He actually went out himself. So this is one idea for us to start to reflect, right? How much of the work that we have to do with delegating to others, as opposed to being responsible and moving on ourselves. So the sower went out to sow. But when we think about to go, we can think about it in two different ways. We can think about it as a material action. So the sower didn't stay home in the comfort of his environment waiting for people to come to him. He actually stood up and he went out. So this is a material view of these went out. But Emmanuel presents to us a different perspective in this text, the sower. He's going to say, and let's look at it more closely because I read it in the beginning. It is necessary to tear down the old prison of the point of view and devote ourselves to serving our neighbor. As we learn the science of extracting ourselves from the dark jail of the self, we start a journey through the great continent called everyone's interest. And in its infinite expanse, we find the land of the souls, choked with thorns, filled with misery, covered with stones, or poisoned with mire, thus offering us a divine opportunity to act for the good of all. So, this is a very different interpretation of went out. It is a much more, well, spiritual, if we want to just for didactic means make a difference here. Everything is spiritual in essence, but um, so to go out is to put aside your own ways of seeing and thinking that so many times becomes a barrier between us and our neighbor. It becomes a barrier for connection. Often we are caught in what we want for ourselves, what's best for us, as opposed to, okay, this may not be the best for me, but it's the best for everybody else. And this is what going out means. Went out means that I leave my own interest, I leave my personal little world, and I go out, I look out, I realize that beyond myself there are others in need, and that attending to other needs sometimes means that I'm going to sacrifice my own need. So it's a much more um, it's a great expansion of the meaning of went out. So the invitation for us here is to then think about not only are we actively and physically going out as sowers, and how much are we going out spiritually? How much can we put ourselves aside and really look at what is the general interest and attend to that as opposed to our own self interest? Okay, so moving on, we're going to look now at the elements of the parable and their meaning. So the parable has three elements: the sower, the seed, and the soil. And we are going to start with the seed. First, let's look at the seed, what the seed means. So the seed is interesting because the seed is good. When we look at the four scenarios that are presented to us, the seed first falls on the wayside, right? And second, the seed is going to fall on the stony ground, the ground with thorns, and the good soil. No matter where the seed falls, the seed will be useful. Even when the seed falls on the wayside, what happens to the seed? The birds will take that seed. So the seed became useful for something. The seed on the stony soil will spring. The seed on the thorny soil will spring and grow, and then further will also produce. Why is that? Because the seed is divine, the seed is the truth, the seed is from God. Therefore, the seed has a mysterious force and a mysterious power. And no matter where it falls, it will always be useful and never lost. Why is this important? Because as sowers, a lot of times will be frustrated with the fact that we don't see immediate results, or we have the idea that the seed has been wasted, that our work has been for nothing. And that is not true, because the seed itself is divine. The seed itself has eternal life within it. So it does not matter where it's going to fall, that seed will remain, and that seed will be useful in one way or another, sometimes ways beyond our own understanding. So that's the important one of the important lessons about the seed. As we move on, we look at the soils, and the soils are often talked about in most of the lectures that look into this. So we have, as I mentioned, the wayside, the stony soil, the soil with thorns, and the good ground. So what do they represent? So the wayside are the people who are not interested in the message at all. They are not aware, they are not, they just, it's not for them. They have absolutely no interest or curiosity about the message. They're completely closed to the message. The stone is a very shallow ground. There's a little bit there. So, in terms of the Spiritist movement, we consider those to be the ones who just arrive at Spiritism and are taken by tons of enthusiasm. They just found out this new message. They are enchanted by its philosophy and all that it brings, but there's no depth to the soil. Therefore, the seed dies pretty quickly. Most of these persons, when there's no depth, not ability to really absorb deeper and understand the implications, the more implications of the message, they are there for a little while, they make a lot of noise, next day they're gone. They're gone looking for something else. Then the stony ones, the thorns, the ones with the thorns, it has a little bit more of depth, so much so that the seed springs and it actually grows. So, but what happens to the seed is that um, it is taken over, right, by the thorns. You suffocate the seed. So that's a lot of times, you know, the thorns, they represent our material interests, our needs for immediate responses, our illusions, our the defenses of our ego, that a lot of times will really suffocate the seed. So, for example, we know that we all bring um, wounds and needs in our inner soul. I recently was talking to a friend about, wanting to go back to therapy and address a few things that I feel like would be important to me. And then I said to him, but like right now, I really don't have time. And then as I said that, I said, no, let me rephrase this. I'm not making it a priority, right? And why am I not making it a priority? And then I come up with a number of excuses. I can say, well, I don't have money, or I need money to remodel my bathroom, or my kids, and we go on. What are these? Thorns suffocating the message. So we all have that. I like to think of our souls as like this huge field with patches. So some patches are wayside, some patches are stony, some patches in, our soul is not a uniform field, but rather a field with different patches of different type of soils in different places. So what is important is to identify, so what thorns are blocking the manifestation of the message within me, right? And then there's the good ground. The good ground is the one that produces, right? And interesting that in the parable, Jesus will say will produce 30 folds or 60 or 100, because even amongst people with good ground, some of us are more ahead of others. Some of us have more resources. We're in different levels of evolution. So the ability to produce will be related to different factors of one's spiritual evolution and conditions in a given moment. So those are like briefly, some of the interpretations of the type of soils and what it means to us. Because as we will see, we are sowers, but we are also soils, right? So we are sowing in someone else's soil, but we have our own soil that we need to attend to. Okay, so here are just some, again, some reflections and some questions that we can ask ourselves as we listen to the parables or any of Jesus' teachings. We're always trying to understand what is the application, how do we apply this to our lives to make it not only something nice that I heard, but something that is meaningful in my day-to-day life. So what is the condition of our inner soil, right? So to reflect about, am I producing? How much am I producing? Can I produce more? Again, what are the thorns? What areas that I'm so defended that I'll say I don't even want to deal with it. So I am that um, wayside type of soil, right? I don't want to deal with it. I'll take care of that in the next incarnation. So you like really pushing aside. So we need to think about those things. How much time and energy is being allotted to take care of the soil, right? So which priority are we giving to addressing? Because the soil needs to be prepared. The soil needs to be in appropriate conditions, and that is our job. Are we able to identify the thorns they're suffocating? Are we open to the interventions of the divine sower? So part of the preparation of the soil is the work that we do together with God in a partnership. So we are taking actions. We are like, for example, paying attention, like I being aware, thinking about those things. It's action. So we're working, allowing ourselves to, humbling ourselves and dealing with our own humanity. We are taking care of the soil, right? We're making the soil more rich with our humbleness, for example. But there's also the divine sower, God. We can think of Jesus, right? And life is working on the soil. So how open are we? How open are we to accept the challenges, to embrace the pain? Because those are important elements that are, revolving the soil of our souls and making the soil more ready to and more rich and more prepared to receive the seeds and to provide the seeds with the proper conditions to flourish and to produce. Now let's look at the last element, which is the sower. So when we think about the sower, we are going back to another passage from Emmanuel when he says, the sower from heaven left his grandeur and came to us to spread the light of revelation and to increase our vision and discernment. And even though he could have been replaced by thousands of messengers if he had wanted to, he humbled himself so that he could be exalted, so that we could be exalted. And he put himself in darkness so that our light could shine. Therefore, let us leave our inhibitions behind and learn with the masters to go out and to sow. So, um, what Emmanuel brings us here is, when we, going back to the beginning of our talk, that we were saying, that the sower went out, right? And we were talking about what that means to us. Now, let's imagine the size of this went out to Jesus. physically, if we can call it this way, right? He left the higher spheres where he lives, and he immersed himself in this brutal world of ours, which is brutal today. I cannot even imagine what it looked like 2,000 years ago. But that is the size of his movement, of his going. The size of his movement, of his displacement, let's put it this way, is equivalent to the size of his love for us. So the more we love, the greater is our ability to go out. So he went out all the way, right? And as the divine sower, we need to look up to him as a reference to see how is it that he did so that we can use as parameters for ourselves to help us in our small mission of assisting the world to become a better place. So here are one of the main tools that he used was time. We're going to look at his methods and his skills. So time. Jesus was extremely respectful of humanity's time for evolution. So he did not impose, he did not try to bring to us more than we could absorb. He told us that we would have more revelations in the future when the consoler would come. So he was very respectful to the time of evolution, which for us is difficult. A lot of times we want to impose on others ideas and concepts that that person is not ready to receive. A lot of and the spirits, the good spirits, our mentors and benefactors are extremely conscientious and respectful to our own time, because we too, we are not ready to understand and to receive the truth, to be able to absorb the truth as the truth is. So it's a gradual process. So as sowers, we have to be conscious that not everything can be sowed at once, and there's time for everything under heaven. But also, he used different methods to sow, to spread the good news. Yes, he spoke, so words, but he also used of silence to spread the message, and of course his examples. So not always speaking is the best. Sometimes we sow by not talking, and we can use, for example, one of the passages from Jesus, the time of that just before he being crucified, when he's going through all the punishments and the trial and the humiliation and everything that preceded the time of uh, him being crucified. If we look at the time, that period of time, it's a time of incredible quietness for someone who is so outspoken. And the quietness of the time left us a very important and loud message, which is the message of obedience and of resignation. And he did it without words. On the contrary, he did it without saying a word. He didn't complain, he didn't accuse, he didn't dispute, he didn't discuss. He was just quiet. And so in being quiet, his quietness spoke very loud and speaks very loud to us up to today, by showing us that the way for eternal life, the way for happiness is acceptance, is resignation, is obedience. And he also, of course, he so much of the sowing, the power of his sowing is on his examples. And his examples, when we look at his life, we can say that he did not come necessarily to combat or extract the evil, but to present us with a very different paradigm, a very different way of living to the exemplification of the virtues. So we could have a different reference of how we're supposed to be living and what is that this pathway of goodness and love can bring us. And finally, he used of some very powerful skills, which we are crawling, if that, to be able to understand and to manifest, which is respect and love. So let's look at some of the ways that Jesus manifested that, this respect and this love for us. So let me go back here. So one of the ways in which he did that is he knew each person that he was talking to. He had a knowledge of who that person was, that person's story, and the language that he or she spoke. He also tried to connect with every single person through empathy, through understanding. Again, understanding who that person was, what those person's values were, what was important to that person so that he could connect to people and not talk to people from in a vertical way of relating, but really a horizontal way of relating. So there is a passage from Paul that I think it really illustrates well what he was trying to do, and I think that what Jesus did with perfection when he says, and give me one second here, when he says, even though I am free of the demands and expectations of everyone, I have voluntarily become a servant to any and all in order to reach a wide range of people: religious, non religious, meticulous moralists, loose living moralists, the defeated, the demoralized, whoever. I didn't care on their way of life. I kept my bearers in Christ, but I entered their world and tried to experience things from their point of view. What a concept! What a concept, one that we are, again, uh, I'll speak for myself. It's just very, very difficult. Enter someone's world and try to experience things from their point of view. I've become just about every sort of servant there is in my attempts to lead those I meet into a good, God saved life. I did all of these because of the message. I didn't just want to talk about it, I want to be in it, on it. So that is a powerful idea right there, right? And I think something that Jesus is a master did with, perfection. So when we are talking to someone, if we could just for a moment try to connect with who that person is, if we know anything about the person's story, try to bring that into the context, try to see if I was in that position, would I be also acting in this way? And so through that, really seek to gain empathy, and that really changes the way that we converse and that we relate to someone else when we are sharing ideas. But the other thing that Jesus did in his love and respect is, again, he was very conscientious of the listener, who is the person who is listening to this message. So if we go back to the beginning again and to the ways in which he taught us about the kingdom of heaven, you might wonder why did he have to repeat the same concept in so many different ways? Because he was teaching that concept to very, very different individuals. And he used the elements of those individual lives to be able to speak to them in a language that they could better understand him. So for the fisherman, the kingdom of heaven is like the net that is cast in a lake, because the fisherman understands this language. Whereas to the farmer, it is the seed that's sowed or that is planted in the field. Whereas to the merchant, it is like you know like a merchant, like someone who is looking for pearls. Where are the pearls? Inside the oyster. So, or the treasure that's also hidden in the field. So he's always adjusting the language to meet the listener's experience and understanding of life. So I feel like we are so self-centered, we are so centered in ourselves, we fail to see the person that is in front of us, and we become very insensitive and very non-empathic when we are showing the message. So those are important skills for us to think about and to slowly try to integrate in our daily lives. So the application, which is, coming to closing our reflection for this morning. First, in this picture, you have the soul and you have the field. So understand that those two are correlated, right? So the more that our souls, our inner field becomes um, a better soil, the more we'll be able to produce, and better souls we will be, because a field that is able to hold the seed and provide the seed with the perfect conditions to spring, to grow, and to produce, is a field that is saturated with love. And when our inner soul is saturated with love, then we are going to manifest this love. And in our relating and in our speech and in our actions, love is going to be permeating everything. More important than imposing ideas will become connecting with other hearts. And there is a passage from Emmanuel that's really beautiful. We're going to get to it in a minute, that talks about the connection. Uh, who are the sowers? A lot of times we think that the sower is the person who is speaking, the speakers in the spirits movement, for example. But sower is anyone and everyone who volunteers to make their lives not only about taking care of themselves, but understand that they have a role and a mission to care for others, for the world, for society as a whole. So when we go to the Spirits book, question 132, and we look at the purpose of incarnation, the second part of the answer is going to say, incarnation also has a further objective, which is to place spirits in conditions where they can do their share of work of creation. On each world, they clothe themselves with an instrument which is in harmony with the essential matter of that world in order to execute in that instrument the orders of God. In this way, while contributing to the general work, they progress at the same time. So we are not here only for our enlightenment, but we are called to assist with the progress of the society, of the world that we live in. So each one of us has a mission, a personal mission, you with yourself and you with the society and the place where you are. So hopefully by the end of our lifetimes, we're going to look back and we're going to say, I'm leaving this world. I am a little better. And I can say that the world also is a little better because of the fact that I was here for 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. Because I have touched lives and I have made a difference in some people's lives. Each one of us is a sower. So we become a sower when we understand the essence of life. We understand our our purpose here, and we volunteer. We make a commitment in our souls to be useful and to use our time, all the resources, all the talents they're given to us, not only to get by day to day and pay our bills, but really, really to make, uh, uh, to leave a mark in this world of goodness, of kindness, of generosity and love. Now, where do I start? Sometimes people can get really overwhelmed, but the world is so messed up, right? I don't think I can do much. I'm so powerless. Well, that's where the lesson of the seed comes handy. So Paul, in his first letter to Corinthians 15:37, he will say, "When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else." So the lesson is pretty clear, I think. We are not going to start by producing things that are big and they're done. You start from the beginning with seeds. So where do we start? Start with small things. Don't expect for things to be ready when you just starting. You just sowing. It starts very little. Things you we need to reset a lot of times our expectations, because part of the frustration is that we sow and we expect results before the time. We expect to see big things happening when the soils are not ready yet to produce big things. So we have to be respectful of the time and of the process of things. So setting the right expectations helps us not to be overwhelmed with the process. Now, in our daily bread, there is a lesson that's called the seed. And in there, Emmanuel will say, the seed wisely exemplifies the need for starting points, conscientious work demands, proper places, and appropriate times. There are restless and insatiable persons who have not yet understood the symbol of the seed. They expect great accomplishments from one day to the next. Knowing how to begin is a very important skill. In our redemptive effort, we must not lose sight of the smallest possibilities. A gesture, a conversation, an hour of your time, or word can represent glorious seeds for immortal accomplishments. So, so many times people will excuse themselves by saying that they don't have the time, they don't have the means, they're not evolved enough, and we go on with our list of excuses. We don't know where to start, but just like the lesson of the seed, you know, we start from the beginning, starting points. Um, we work, we figure out the proper places, the proper times, the proper circumstances. We set up our expectations, understanding that there's a process for everything, and we start from little things. It doesn't need to be huge projects, little things. Like Emmanuel says, kindness, patience, a smile, a time that you give to someone, time that you take to have a conversation. By doing those things, we're showing hope. A lot of times, our offer, our whatever it is that we are giving, has results and outcomes that we'll never know, but that can make a huge impact on people's lives. So it's important that everyone is conscientious that we all have something to give. We all are sowers in this world. We all can make an impact. And what I believe needs to happen is that we need to really integrate this mindset in our daily lives, and say to our Lord, I am here. Make me the best instrument that I can be, the best sower that I can be. Guide me. And as I am committing myself each day to do my inner work and to establish the kingdom of God, of heaven within my own self. And what do we expect, right? So I'm going to bring here this passage from Matthew when Jesus says, "And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother, wife or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life." Why do I put this here in answer to what to expect? Because a lot of times not everybody is going to understand the roads and the paths that we have chosen in our life. So Emmanuel, once more, he will interpret this passage for us, which he does so in the way, the truth, and the life in chapter 154, called renouncing. And here he's going to say, if parents lack understanding, if one's spouse is ungrateful, if brothers and sisters seem cruel, then it is necessary to renounce the happiness of wanting them to be perfect and commit to them even more in order to work for everyone's evolution with Jesus. Renouncing for Christ's sake means giving up the hopes of the world to gain those of heaven. This is so powerful. This is so incredibly powerful. And it reminds me of the passage from Joanna uh, from Cusa in where she looks for Jesus to uh, wanting to follow him, right? And he says to her that, if he wanted to follow, if she wanted to follow him, to go back to her house and take care of her husband, who was her spiritual mission first. And so a lot of times, as we are sowing, we will be misunderstood. A lot of times we'll be dealing with ungrateful relatives and people in our lives. And what do? Do we abandon them? No. We renounce the happiness of wanting them to be perfect, which is so powerful, because we must start by renouncing the happiness of wanting ourselves to be perfect at the present moment. It's not going to happen. So when we accept that we can't be perfect today, there is a process itself that, God planted those seeds within us, and it will take time and the right circumstances for the soil to be ready and for the seeds to be able to spring and produce. Then we can actually experience that with others as well. The rigidity in which we deal with ourselves, we project onto others. So renounce the happiness of wanting them to be perfect and commit to them even more. So you don't walk away from them. To renounce the way that Jesus said is to renounce our expectations. But it doesn't mean that we're leaving them. We're actually walking with them. We're staying next to them. We continue with our path. And a lot of times the sowing in this case will be through silence and through examples, but we don't abandon them. And a lot of times we need to shift our expectations of perfection, of happiness, or the production of the soil from this world, from the present moment, to the spiritual life or to the future life. And I think this is, yeah. So, so this is the message for this morning. I think we have covered as much as possible the aspects of the parable of the sower, and our intent is that with this message, we are able to understand that we have a role, that we have a mission, and that this world, going back to the very first thing that I said, right? Why the parable of the sower? We are in a time of transitioning. And like Jesus said, the field is huge, but the workers are very few. So we need more workers in the sense that we need more people who commit to do this work as much as possible in a conscientious, organized, and structured way. Yes, the world is our field. Anywhere and everywhere that we are called to be sowers. We are called to be spreading the message one way or another. Always keep in mind the need to be respectful and loving in the way Jesus did, so that we don't become obnoxious, hostile, and violent in trying to impose our ideas. Always keep in mind that people need time and being respectful of the time and evolution of people. So, with those things in mind, but being very conscientious that we are souls anywhere and everywhere, let the Lord help us to be each day more and more available, available in our thoughts, available in our feelings, available in our commitment, available to say, yes, I'm ready. Yes, I can help. Yes, I can go, because life is full of invitations. We are getting ready, hopefully, to be back in person very soon. The pandemic has brought a lot of good things and a lot of challenging things for us. On the good side, we became more aware of the importance of being home, of connection with our families. We became, much better in dealing with the resources of technology. But for a lot of us right now, it's being a little challenged to go back in person to our activities. And some of us is under the belief that we don't need to anymore, which I kindly disagree. And why do I disagree? Because we are still very, very far from having the discipline, from having the 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 experiences in person, and the learning that the actual um, presence provide us in the spiritual center, in our spiritual homes. Nothing substitutes the day-to-day, you know, experience of being with one another and the challenges that this experience brings to all of us. We also need the structure of our spiritual centers. We need the work. We need the connection to support us. We're not quite ready yet to go without this very important element, which is the physical element. So soon we'll be, you know, invited to return, and we hope to see everybody there, because we need every single worker, we need every single heart, we need every single person that can join us, join all the other centers who are reopening, as we together figure out how we can move forward, integrating everything that has been given to us from COVID, from the pandemic that we're very much still in, how we can maximize all these resources and become individually and collectively better sowers in this world. So, thank you very much, guys, for your attention this morning. Thank you for being here. I am going to do our final prayer now. So please join me by saying, Dear Father, thank you so much for your lessons, for your loving presence amongst us, for everything that you came to teach us. We are so thankful and grateful for the opportunity to join every Sunday or anytime with these live lectures, to connect with with what is essential in our lives, for the reminders that we still need so much. Thank you for the blessings. Thank you for these days. Thank you for everything that we have, for everything that we are, and bless this world, dear Father. Bless this humanity. Bless every single person that is struggling, that is in darkness, that is in need, especially the ones who feel that there is no purpose for their own existences. Let them be touched by your love and understand how divine and beautiful and powerful they are. Bless us all. Bless our week. Thank you again for everything. Bless our group, all the people who join us throughout this meeting. And thank you again for your loving presence in our lives. And so be it. All right, dear friends, again, thank you very much for being here this morning. I wish you all a wonderful day, and we'll be back next Sunday.